Haunted by unrelenting whispers and a deadly curse, Musa must uncover the truth behind the grave's dark secret. Can he right the wrongs of the past before the spirit claims its revenge? This chilling tale will keep you hooked until the very end. The night was thick with silence, broken only by the sound of crickets and the occasional rustle of leaves. Musa staggered down the dirt path, his breath reeking of palm wine. His friend, Jide, walked beside him, clearly annoyed. "Musa, I told you not to drink so much. Now look at you," Jide grumbled. "We are far from home, and you can barely walk straight." Musa waved him off, laughing. "You worry too much, my friend. What's the worst that can happen? A ghost won't come for me, will it?" His laugh echoed eerily in the quiet night, making Jide shiver. As they passed the cemetery, Musa felt an uncomfortable pressure in his bladder. Ignoring Jide's protest, he stumbled into the overgrown graveyard. "I'll just be a minute," he slurred. He approached a neglected grave, its headstone covered in moss and its inscription barely visible. Without a second thought, Musa relieved himself on the grave. "Musa, are you mad?" Jide hissed from the path. "That's someone's resting place. You're inviting trouble." "Trouble? From who?" "The dead. Let them come." Musa mocked, zipping up his trousers. But as he turned to leave, he felt a chill crawl up his spine. From the corner of his eye, he saw something, or someone, watching him from the shadows of the trees. Musa froze, his drunken haze momentarily lifting. The figure in the shadows didn't move but seemed to be staring straight at him. Its pale, thin frame was barely discernible in the darkness, but its glowing eyes, two piercing orbs of white, cut through the gloom like blades. "Musa, what's wrong?" Jide called, his voice shaky. "Let's go." Musa blinked hard and turned toward Jide, forcing a grin. "Nothing's wrong. You're being paranoid." He stumbled back toward the path, refusing to glance over his shoulder. But as they walked away, the sensation of being watched lingered, and he could swear he heard faint whispers, though Jide didn't seem to notice. When they finally reached the village, Musa shook off his unease and waved Jide good night. "Don't be such a coward," he teased before heading to his hut. But as he lay down to sleep, he couldn't shake the image of those glowing eyes. The whispers grew louder in his mind, like a breeze calling through cracks in the walls. He convinced himself it was just the alcohol and drifted into an uneasy slumber. That night, he dreamed of the graveyard. In his dream, the grave he had urinated on split open, and a skeletal figure clawed its way out. It was the same figure from the trees, only this time it was much closer. Its bony hand reached for him, its eyelid sockets burning with hatred. Musa woke up screaming, drenched in sweat. For the first time in years, he felt true fear. The next morning, Musa shook off the nightmare, laughing at himself for being so jumpy. "It's nothing," he muttered. "Just a bad dream." But the unease lingered, and as he stepped outside, the world felt different. The air was heavy, and the villagers he passed avoided his gaze. Whispers trailed behind him, and he caught fragments of sentences. "Something's wrong with Musa. Did you see his eyes?" When he returned home later that day, he found his prized goat dead in the yard, its body stiff and eyes bulging. There were no signs of a struggle, no predators in sight. It was as if the life had been sucked out of it. He stared at the carcass in shock, the whispers from the night before replaying in his mind. Later that evening, Jide came by, his face pale. "Musa, something strange is happening," he said, his voice low. "Last night, after we parted ways, I thought I heard someone following me. When I looked back, I saw. I don't even know how to describe it. But it was pale, with glowing eyes." Musa's blood ran cold. "You're imagining things," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. He forced a laugh, trying to push away the creeping dread. But when he went to bed that night, the whispers returned, louder and clearer than before. This time, they weren't just whispers, they were words. You desecrated my grave. You will pay. Musa lay frozen in his bed, unable to move. A cold breeze swept through the room, though the windows were tightly shut. Then, at the foot of his bed, he saw them again, those glowing eyes, watching him. Musa awoke with a jolt, the glowing eyes from the night before burned into his memory. The whispers had vanished, but the room felt colder than it should. He sat up in bed, clutching his chest, and told himself it was another dream. Yet, deep down, he knew something was wrong. The day passed uneventfully until dusk. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Musa dozed off while sitting outside his hut. This time, the dream was even more vivid. The skeletal figure stood at the graveyard, pointing at him with a bony finger. Its voice rasped like the rustling of dry leaves. You have desecrated my resting place. A price must be paid. Musa fell to his knees in the dream, trembling. I didn't mean to. It was a mistake. But the figure only repeated, a price must be paid, before the ground beneath Musa opened up, pulling him into darkness. He woke up screaming, the sensation of falling still fresh. His neighbors gathered outside his hut, whispering about curses and spirits. Jide approached cautiously. Musa, you need help. Go see Baba Omael, the elder. He knows about these things. Musa hesitated, but the fear was too great to ignore. He agreed to visit the elder the next day. Baba Omael's hut sat on the edge of the village, surrounded by herbs and charms. The old man was stirring a pot of something foul-smelling when Musa and Jide arrived. Without looking up, Baba Omael muttered, You've angered the dead. Musa froze. How do you know? I heard the whispers in the wind, Baba Omael said, finally looking up with cloudy, unseeing eyes. Tell me what you did. Ashamed, Musa confessed everything. Baba Omael's expression hardened. The grave you desecrated belongs to Otikpo, a powerful herbalist who was betrayed and buried in disgrace. His spirit is restless. The curse will only grow stronger until you make amends. Musa swallowed hard. How do I fix this? The elder handed him a bundle of herbs and a small charm. Burn these at the grave and beg for forgiveness. Do not take this lightly. Otikpo's wrath is not easily quelled. Musa nodded, clutching the items as though his life depended on them. That night, Musa returned to the graveyard, heart pounding. The air was heavy with an unnatural chill, and shadows danced ominously among the trees. He reached Otikpo's grave and knelt, lighting the herbs with trembling hands. I'm sorry, he whispered, his voice cracking. I didn't mean to offend you. Please forgive me. The herbs burned quickly, releasing a thick, acrid smoke. For a moment, the air grew still, and Musa thought it was over. But then, the ground beneath him rumbled, and a voice boomed from nowhere. Words are not enough. A debt must be repaid. Musa screamed as the wind howled, extinguishing the fire. He ran back to his hut, but the whispers followed him. That night, the shadows in his room moved, forming shapes that reached for him. Desperate, Musa sought out the gravekeeper, a reclusive man named Adisa who lived near the cemetery. Adisa was known for his knowledge of the supernatural but rarely interacted with the villagers. When Musa explained his plight, Adisa listened silently, his face unreadable. After a long pause, he said, The dead are not easily appeased. Otikpo will demand something valuable, perhaps even your life. Musa paled. There must be another way. Adisa sighed. There is a ritual, but it is dangerous and not guaranteed to work. If you fail, the curse will worsen. I'll do it, Musa said, his voice shaking. Adisa explained the ritual would require an offering, a piece of Musa's soul. It's a symbolic act, he said, but it will cost you greatly. Musa agreed, desperate to end the torment. That night, under Adisa's guidance, he performed the ritual. He offered a lock of his hair, a drop of his blood, and a heartfelt plea for mercy. At first, nothing happened. Then the wind picked up, and Otikpo's voice echoed through the night. This is not enough. Adisa frowned. You have to uncover what Otikpo truly wants. Musa and Adisa sat together in the dim light of the gravekeeper's hut, the air thick with tension. Adisa, hunched over a stack of dusty scrolls and old village records, explained the importance of uncovering the truth about Otikpo. To appease a restless spirit, you must understand their pain. Only then can you offer what they truly desire, he said, his voice low and deliberate. Musa, still shaken from his earlier encounters with the ghost, nodded numbly. He had no choice but to follow Adisa's guidance. They began poring over the records, searching for any mention of Otikpo. Hours turned into days, and frustration mounted as they found little more than scattered rumors and incomplete accounts. Finally, Adisa stumbled upon a ledger from decades earlier. It detailed a trial held in the village square, where Otikpo had been accused of poisoning Chief Obodil, a revered leader. The accusation had come from a rival herbalist, a man named Makind, who claimed Otikpo's jealousy had driven him to murder. What happened during the trial? Musa asked, leaning forward. Adisa frowned, his weathered fingers tracing the faded ink. It says the evidence was circumstantial. A vial of poison was found near Otikpo's hut, but there were no witnesses, and Otikpo denied the accusations. Despite this, the village turned against him. They were too afraid to question Makind's word. Musa's stomach churned. So he was innocent. Adisa's expression darkened. It seems likely. The people were quick to judge, and Otikpo was executed without a proper investigation. His grave was left unmarked, a final insult to his legacy. The weight of this revelation settled heavily on Musa. He now understood why Otikpo's spirit was so enraged. The injustice of his death had left a wound that could not heal. What can I do to fix this? Musa asked, his voice trembling. You must prove his innocence, Adisa said firmly. Clear his name, and perhaps his spirit will find peace. As Musa delved deeper into Otikpo's story, the curse escalated. His once thriving farm became a barren wasteland, the crops wilting overnight. His livestock began behaving erratically, some falling ill without explanation. Worse still, the whispers that haunted him grew louder, more menacing, as though the spirit was impatient for him to act. The villagers began to notice Musa's misfortune. At first, they offered sympathy, but as the days passed and the strange occurrences continued, their attitudes shifted to suspicion. It's his curse, they whispered among themselves. He's brought bad luck to us all. Children avoided his hut, and neighbors refused to trade with him. Musa felt the weight of their stares wherever he went. Even Jide, his closest friend, began keeping his distance. Musa, you have to fix this, Jide said one evening, standing at the edge of Musa's property. The village is turning against you. I'm trying, Musa replied, his voice breaking. But it's not that simple. Otikpo's spirit wants justice, and I don't know if I can give it to him in time. Meanwhile, Adisa worked tirelessly to uncover more evidence. He visited elders who remembered the trial, hoping their memories might provide new insights. One elder, a frail woman named Momo Folek, revealed a crucial detail. Makin was always envious of Otikpo, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Otikpo was more skilled, more respected. I wouldn't be surprised if Makin planted that poison himself. Armed with this information, Musa and Adisa realized they needed proof to support the claim. They searched Makin's old home, now abandoned and overgrown with weeds. Hidden beneath the floorboards, they found a tattered journal. Inside were notes detailing Makin's jealousy and his plans to discredit Otikpo. "This is it," Adisa said, holding up the journal. "This is the evidence we need to clear Otikpo's name." With the journal in hand, Musa and Adisa prepared for the next ritual. It was their most dangerous task yet, requiring them to confront Otikpo's spirit directly and present the evidence of his innocence. The ritual had to be performed at midnight, under the full moon, when the boundary between the living and the dead was thinnest. The graveyard was unnervingly quiet as they approached. The moon cast long, eerie shadows across the overgrown graves, and the air was thick with an unnatural chill. Adisa arranged the ritual items carefully: a clay pot filled with ashes from sacred herbs, the journal containing Makin's confession, and a carved wooden staff adorned with charms for protection. Musa knelt before Otikpo's grave, clutching the journal tightly. His hands trembled, but he forced himself to speak. "Otikpo, I come to offer the truth. You were wrongfully accused, and I have proof of your innocence." As he spoke, the ground began to tremble. A cold wind swept through the graveyard, extinguishing their lantern. The darkness seemed alive, pressing in around them. Slowly, Otikpo's ghost rose from the grave, his skeletal form illuminated by a faint, otherworldly glow. The spirit's eyes burned with rage as he loomed over Musa. "You claim to bring the truth?" Otikpo's voice boomed, shaking the earth. "Do you think mere words can erase the pain of betrayal? Show me this proof." Musa held up the journal, his voice shaking. "This is Makin's confession. He admitted to framing you out of envy. You were innocent, Otikpo. The village wronged you." Otikpo reached out, his bony fingers brushing the journal. The wind howled as the ghost absorbed the knowledge within. For a moment, the rage in his glowing eyes softened, replaced by something akin to sorrow. "You have done well to uncover the truth," Otikpo said, his voice quieter now. "But words alone cannot heal the wound of injustice. The village must know of my innocence. Only then will I find peace." Musa bowed his head. "I will tell them. I will make sure they remember your name and your story." The ghost lingered for a moment longer before retreating into the grave. The air grew still, and the oppressive weight that had plagued the graveyard lifted slightly. Adisa placed a hand on Musa's shoulder. "You've taken the first step, but your work is not done. The village must hear the truth." As they left the graveyard, Musa felt a glimmer of hope for the first time in weeks. The path ahead would not be easy, but he was determined to see it through. Chapter 12: The Betrayal. Fear consumed Musa as the spirit's demands loomed over him. A debt must be paid, Otikpo's ghost had said, but the weight of those words was too much for Musa to bear. As he left the graveyard with Adisa, a dark thought crept into his mind: what if he didn't finish the ritual? What if he could escape it all? That night, Musa packed a small bag, taking only what he needed for travel. "If I leave the village, the curse might not follow me," he whispered to himself. The fear of facing Otikpo's wrath was greater than the guilt weighing on him. Under the cover of darkness, he slipped out of his hut and began his journey to a neighboring town, hoping to start over. At first, things seemed fine. The air was quiet, and the whispers that had haunted him for days were absent. But as he approached the edge of the village, a sudden chill enveloped him. The wind howled, and he felt the unmistakable sensation of ice watching him. The path ahead seemed to stretch unnaturally, twisting into the darkness. Musa hesitated, turning to look behind him. To his horror, faint, glowing eyes appeared in the distance, drawing closer with every blink. He broke into a run, but no matter how fast he moved, the path ahead stretched endlessly, and the glowing eyes multiplied. Exhausted and terrified, Musa collapsed to his knees. The whispers returned, louder than ever, taunting him. You cannot escape. You cannot hide. Your betrayal has sealed your fate. The ground beneath him trembled, and shadows reached out, clawing at his skin. Musa screamed, the darkness swallowing him whole. When he awoke, he was back at the graveyard, lying at the foot of Otikpo's grave. The ghost voice echoed in his mind, colder than before. Run again, and you will lose more than your soul. Shaken by his failed escape, Musa returned to Adisa, who was waiting by the graveyard. I told you not to betray the ritual, Adisa said sternly, his tone laced with disappointment. The spirits are merciless. Each misstep brings you closer to ruin. Musa broke down, tears streaming down his face. I was afraid, Adisa. I didn't know what else to do. Adisa sighed deeply and placed a hand on Musa's shoulder. Fear is natural, but it cannot guide your actions. If you truly wish to end this, you must complete the ritual fully and honestly this time. With little time left, Musa and Adisa walked quickly to prepare for the final confrontation. They collected rare herbs, sacred items, and a clay pot to carry offerings. Adisa also instructed Musa to carve a symbol of repentance into his palm with a sharp blade, a painful act meant to demonstrate his sincerity to the spirit. The day passed in tense silence as they prepared. By nightfall, Musa's heart felt like a drum, pounding against his ribs. He knew this would be his last chance. The curse had escalated, the whispers were now deafening, the air around him felt heavy and suffocating, and the shadows seemed to mock his every move. As they approached the graveyard, the winds picked up, howling like a mourning wail. The earth trembled beneath their feet, and the trees surrounding the graveyard seemed to lean inward, as though watching them. Adisa handed Musa a small charm. Hold this tightly, he said. It will shield you from Otikpo's full wrath, but only if your heart is true. The ritual began under a full moon, its pale light casting eerie shadows over the graveyard. Musa stood before Otikpo's grave, trembling as he held the clay pot filled with offerings, the evidence of Otikpo's innocence, ashes from the herbs, and the blood from Musa's carved palm. Adisa chanted in a language Musa didn't understand, his voice resonating through the graveyard like a drumbeat. The air grew colder, and the ground beneath Otikpo's grave began to shift. Slowly, a spectral form rose, towering above them. Otikpo's ghost was more menacing than ever, his skeletal frame wrapped in a shroud of mist, his glowing eyes burning with fury. Do you think a few words and tokens can undo the pain you caused? Otikpo's voice boomed, shaking the earth. Do you think this is enough to cleanse your disrespect? Musa fell to his knees, clutching the charm Adisa had given him. I am sorry, great Otikpo, he cried. I was foolish and disrespectful, but I have learned my lesson. Please, I beg for your forgiveness. The ghost misty form reached toward Musa, enveloping him in darkness. In an instant, Musa found himself in a vision. He was standing in the village, watching Otikpo's trial unfold. He saw the accusations, the betrayal of friends, and the unjust punishment. He felt Otikpo's pain and humiliation as though it were his own. The vision intensified, and Musa screamed as the herbalist's suffering became unbearable. When the vision ended, Musa collapsed to the ground, gasping for breath. Otikpo's ghost hovered above him, his expression unreadable. Now you understand my pain, the spirit said. But understanding is not enough. Prove your repentance. Musa looked up at the spirit, tears streaming down his face. I will dedicate my life to honoring you and those like you who were wronged, he vowed. I will teach others to respect the dead and the truth. Please, release me from this curse, and I will spend the rest of my days making amends. For a long moment, Otikpo's ghost was silent. Then, slowly, his form began to fade. The wind died down, and the graveyard grew still. Your words carry truth, the ghost said, his voice softer now. You are free. But remember, Musa, disrespect the dead again, and there will be no redemption. As Otikpo's presence vanished, the graveyard felt lighter, almost peaceful. Adisa helped Musa to his feet. "It's over," the gravekeeper said, though his voice was heavy with exhaustion. "You've been given a second chance. Don't waste it." Musa returned to the village, his heart weighed down by guilt but also relief. He rebuilt his life slowly, using his experience as a warning to others. He became a storyteller, sharing the tale of Otikpo's grave and the price of disrespecting the dead. The curse was lifted, but Musa was forever changed. He never entered a graveyard without bowing his head in respect, and he never again allowed his arrogance to blind him. Though he lived humbly, his story echoed across the land, a reminder that the dead are not to be mocked, and that redemption is possible, but only for those brave enough to face their mistakes. The moral lessons of this story teaches the importance of respecting the dead, understanding that actions have consequences, seeking truth and justice, taking responsibility for mistakes, and avoiding hasty judgments without evidence. Thank you, listeners, for listening to this wonderful story. I'd really appreciate it if, after enjoying this story, you could take a moment to like, share, subscribe and leave a comment on what you learned from this story. Your support means a lot and helps encourage me to keep sharing more stories. Bye.